Disruptors, welcome for another episode. I'm Alina Kokorotsis, the license holder for DisruptHR Rochester and the host for today's conversation. At DisruptHR Rochester, our mission is to truly ignite conversations that inspire positive change in both organizations and the community here we serve in Rochester and beyond. But today we are diving into a really important topic about the disruptor spark in talent development. And I am joined by an amazing panel of both colleagues and friends. And first, I wanted to welcome my fellow Disrupt HR Rochester team member, Barb Glassman, who is one of the original founders of Disrupt HR ROC. She has served as our annual event project manager, and also is an ICF credentialed certified coach and the president and lead consultant for G-Force Collaboration. So welcome, Barb.
Thank you, Leanne. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for the invite.
And our second guest for today is Leanne Reed, president of the Rochester chapter of the Association for Talent Development. And she has served for several years as our Disrupt Speaker Committee lead and is the owner of Hubbub Solutions. Welcome, Leanne. So happy to have you.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
And last but not least, Corey Raji, Chief Operating Officer at One RDG, the Financial Center, a past Disrupt HR Rochester speaker and a sponsor, and also the owner of Rippled Radio. Welcome, Corey. So nice to have you.
Thank you for having me, Alina.
So before we talk about this disruptor spark in talent development, and kind of for fun, right? Can you each maybe describe talent development in 3 words? Leanne, want to go first?
Only 3? Okay.
3.
I'm going to start with power, innovation, and resilience.
I'll jump in. I use exciting, dynamic, and ever-changing.
Nice.
I'd say personal, continuous, and varying. I want to elaborate on that, but I'm trying to stick to the 3 words, so I'll just elaborate later.
Well, do you want to each elaborate? I mean, we can elaborate a little bit. Why not?
Well, it's funny because I want to say continuous. As we talk about this, I feel like people are going to listen and they're either going to feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing it enough. I'm not doing it. And I say continuous but varying because it's always sort of an app running in the background, but sometimes it's the front of your screen and sometimes it's not. And that's okay. Different seasons sort of give you that. So I guess the first thing I would want to share with listeners is if you're listening, don't worry or feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough. There are seasons for this where you have the energy for it and seasons where you don't, both as a leader and as a recipient of it. So, I want people to be able to just listen comfortably and without defenses and an open mind.
And, Corey, you touched on something that I think is really important, that talent development is complex and layered, and it comes and goes. It has its own flow. And the core is always looking at where our skills, our knowledge, our capabilities, where's our innovation, where's our agility, what are we building? And so what you're building, what I'm building, what Barb and Alina are building are all different at different times, right? Me personally, I'm different every single day, it feels like, but just, looking at what talent development encompasses so many professions. It's in every single industry. It's a personal priority, hopefully for a lot of folks, but it's also a cultural imperative for us to create the workspaces that we wish to be in. So,
And Leanne, what were the 3 words you said? Power,
innovation, resilience.
We'll go back to that. We'll put that on the parking lot for a second, but we'll go back to resilience. Barb, did you want to elaborate a little bit more on yours as well?
No, I think, I think we've got a lot to cover today. And so I would like to jump into our questions. I think all of this will surface along the way.
Yeah, for sure. So when you all think about talent development, and especially like 2025, but also like what has changed in the last few years that that maybe you can share from, the things you have experienced?
I think a lot, in my mind, there's this big change rewinding 5 years ago, when a lot of organizations became more remote or more hybrid. And one of the pieces of feedback that our team gave that I thought was so poignant was, say, 2019, let's say someone is going to meet with a client and they're riding with a manager, or a manager is riding with them, and they would prep for the meeting on the way there in the car. And they'd have the meeting, and then they'd come back and they'd talk on the way back. Those have been replaced by Zoom meetings that employees walk into their boss's office 3 minutes before it starts. And you lose some of the organic talent development that happens by proximity, that happens casually. And I think it's required us to be more intentional about how do you create some of that on-the-job learning that just happens by proximity and contact when you're in these different working environments. So I think a lot of people have had to make a shift with that. Doesn't mean you can't, but it definitely has required a different look.
Well, Corey,
Yeah, it
I would
requires the
support that.
leaders. Yeah. Go ahead, Barb.
No, I was going to say that, I think you bring up this really important point that there's so much more of a coach mindset that goes into what used to happen along the way. And it was through, like you said, proximity or just exposure that people picked up things that weren't even necessarily talked about that have to be identified, in the remote world a little bit differently.
I think also in the last few years, I've seen a shift in people's awareness of what they need to be comfortable, to sustain their productivity, to be visible in the work environment. I mean, there are a lot of things that have shifted, but I'm loving this higher awareness of the individuals, but also that requires our leaders to also increase their awareness of what has changed for them as individuals. The other piece that it's coming through really strongly for me is that our lives are integrated. So, an old notion is that we can compartmentalize our work, our home, our kids, our family. We can put them in different spaces by virtue of where we were environmentally, right? We were at work, we're at home, that sort of thing. We don't have that kind of separation as we did before, which means everything is important. All of your time is important. What you bring to each space is important. And when there is some consistency in purpose and value and that sort of thing, you see much happier people at work. You see higher productivity. You see all kinds of engagement, innovation, thinking, creativity. It really happens beautifully. Although I do want to say I'm a big fan of boundaries. I have huge boundaries. So that's very important. But just this notion that how we work and how we live needs to have some connection and some purpose in that. So,
and what's coming up for me, it's the intentionality, right? Like we have to be more intentional because life is so integrated now, because all these different priorities, like you have to be more intentional with how you're prioritizing the things you want to do, the things you want to accomplish. And then, but going into that disruption in talent development and that disruptive, like the spark, right? How or where do you see the biggest opportunities in this integrated world?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of something that Leanne said about the individualization of it. When we've got people in different environments, I think, say 20 years ago, you said development, people thought classroom training, and they thought book. And when you combine varying work environments, jobs that have changed a lot, the rapid speed of development in terms of technology, there's so many more factors and variables in the workplace than there were. One size doesn't fit all anymore. So leaders and organizations that are very skilled at customizing and connecting with people individually, I think we'll see better retention. If they don't, they see more job hopping. You see employees leave a job for a new experience instead of getting a new experience in a job. So to me, that disruption is in the ability to individualize and be great at it.
I love that. My thought on that too was about the individual. The spark in the individual can be maximized and can drive workflow change, work outcome change, workplace change. Recognizing what that spark is, what they need, what they're attracted to, what gets them excited and engaged is great, and we can use that. We can use that quote spark or disrupt to actually affect positive change across the board and through every layer of our organizations. So it's kind of exciting when you think about it because they bring it with them. It's there.
Yeah,
it's already
yeah,
there. So.
they do. How do you recognize that? Like, how do you pinpoint someone who has that disruptor spark?
Well, I would jump in to say, I think positive curiosity. I want to pick up on, it's so easy to be looking at all that's not right. It's not, or isn't comfortable. And so I think that for me, it's around this looking at things differently with excitement and curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's two things for me that make me sort of identify someone as a potentially great people leader, because I think they need that disruptor spark to be one. One is when they get their first taste of leadership and they see a positive impact, they come into my office excited. They want to tell me a story because they felt some pride. And that is always an early indicator to me of like, wait a minute, this person's got it. And I absolutely love that. I think the second piece of it is the people that with that also might come running in your office and saying, hey, we've got this situation. What if we ... the idea bringers. I love them and they're not afraid to say what if and to bring that idea to the table. I think of them as disruptor people with the spark because it gives it to me. And I know if it gave it to me, it's probably going to give it to other people in the organization that they touch.
Yeah, I love the energy piece is really interesting to me too. I think of my pouncers and my thinkers, right? The pouncers are like, hey, what about, and like they'll they jump on your words and jump in the middle of a conversation, and because they're excited, they're seeing something different and possibilities. But you have the same spark, it just looks different in the thinkers who are absorbing everything and assessing it and may actually have a much broader vision. So how to encourage both of those styles essentially to come in with that, hey, what if, what about, how can we, right? Those things are, I may be getting ahead of us a little bit, but I also think about those spaces and energy I personally love, but not everybody does. Other folks will perceive that as interrupting and being off track and not paying attention. And we have a structure, leave it alone, sort of thing. So kind of that squashing of the spark. So it's important to think about how to assist in folks getting heard and not being devalued or dismissed along the way.
I think you bring up a really important point about appreciating the different styles. And as I've listened to the last couple of minutes, I think it's people who are thinking about the we. If you think about all of the statements that were made, it's how about we think this, or how about we do this? And it's thinking about something greater than themselves is one of the things for me that identifies the spark.
I love all these. And, it's making me think of when we first started talking about this topic and we were brainstorming ideas of, what should this podcast be about? And Corey, you had a great analogy about your role as the chief operations officer or even HR's role, right? Or even talent management, leaders and culture people's role is to be that fire pit and that foundation that lets those embers grow. And can you share a little bit about that analogy? It kind of really stick with me and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I love an analogy. I overuse them. I do, but they just I feel like they tell a great story. And when we were all talking that first day, I was um I was enjoying the different angles that the three of us came at it from because of the different seats that we currently hold in our companies. And when I made the switch from pure HR and talent development to COO, at the beginning, I would fall back into, you know, kind of being the one trying to do the work. And then I realized you need to be somebody that enables other people to do that work. Your job is shifting, right? But I still have a huge role in it. And I view my role as COO as ensuring that our environment is one that can allow talent development to thrive. And so in my mind, I was like, I'm the fire pit. It's got to be this place where the flames can start and they're able to keep going. And you've got this world where this is supposed to be happening. It's made for it and it can thrive in it. And everybody has a job in that, right? Like some people are stacking the wood and some people are adding the fire starters to it. Everybody has that role. My job is to make sure that I've got a place they can come to do that, because I'm touching all the functions. So do we walk the walk? Do we or walk the talk and talk the walk, etc.? Like, do we make all the systems work together? Um, it was kind of my thought. And I know, Barb, we had an example of yours and Leanne for yours. So I'm the fire keeper there. And it's funny because I had fires this weekend and I'm realizing like that was even what I did at home. I love it.
Mhm. You describe a beautiful thing, though, in that, well, there's a term that I love. It's called culture shaping. And I love that term because it can be teeny tiny things, huge things, but we culture shape every day, every conversation, every employee that we hire. It's constant, right? And it's like tending to that fire constantly. Sometimes it needs more wood. Sometimes we got too much wood, sometimes, but how do we balance that? And what does that look like as we move through is really important, but providing the space where you're allowed to start a fire, right? You're allowed to let it burn a little bit, and then you can maybe you need someone to help you kind of, maybe we'll bring that back down a little bit, and that's fine too. But it's like, I like how you described it's a culture, it's a group effect. It's not one person leads and this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. It really is very organic and dynamic, and that's a wonderful. But the space does have to be safe, right? So if it isn't, then I may start a fire and they may douse me with water and out I go, right? You never see me again. You never see my ideas again. I may still be there, but you may not get my spark anymore. It may be gone. So,
and I think that's just so important, that we're talking about this safety point because, it, for me, I think part of the environment needs to be this set of agreements, right? That we're going to be authentic, that we're going to take care of each other. And sometimes that goes sideways with styles. And so how do we as leaders make sure that we keep some guardrails in place and handle, what may go a little sideways or be a little bit too much of that flame, and keep everybody involved. So Leanne, I think that's really important, how quickly. I think that's why we see so much transition is when people who, they're bringing in their ideas and innovation, and they're falling on deaf ears, or they feel squashed so fast, they're just going to run. Who can afford that? We've got to take care of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a double-edged sword in that we need to champion these folks, right? We need to keep doors open for them. We need to show them a path also. So there's some individual accountability for actions, language, behavior, all of that, to ensure that the message is heard and received. And then the championing part is, keeping that door open, when people are trying to shut it or say, again, or whatever their response is, and say, hey, just there's room. there's room for this. And also to embrace the idea that we are going to experiment with new things, new ideas, new actions, new workflows, those sorts of things. And they may or may not be wildly successful. And that's okay. The point was to experiment. So keeping that door open and championing those folks that maybe this one thing didn't work out as well as we'd hoped, but what's next? What did we learn from it? What's next? So it's always a multiplicative process. It's an additive space. It's not and we're done, which sadly I've seen happen more than a few times, many places.
I think about like tactical day to day, like how does this really play out in an organization? And, some specific things came to my mind. One of them, to piggyback on what both of you are saying, is that mistakes are okay. What did you learn from it? And that helps people recover more quickly and move on. The second piece is when you are in a closer mentor relationship with someone, being available in the moments. It's not always about a monthly meeting. It's also about something happened. Can you reach out to me? And that has to be a cultural thing. One of the things that we did at 1RDG that really changed our talent development was the creation of a formal mentorship program. And everybody's relationship was a little bit different, but everybody had access to a human being that cared about their development in the building, that they could ask questions that were a little bit outside of the day-to-day work. And those are the things that you can do on a daily basis to ensure that you've got that fire pit and you're allowing for talent development to be a priority. That increases the leader's understanding of what's going on. It ensures the employees know it's a priority, and you're available in those pivotal moments to help them redirect and do all of those things that we're talking about.
And that's really a mindset and a belief, right? As far as I am partnering with you to sustain your spark, to grow your spark, to develop you, to develop your talent, rather than let me show you how to do this. Let me teach you, is a more static way. And honestly, there are things and skills that we need that, right? Because otherwise I would never figure out how to turn on my computer, So but it's that space of asking, what's going on? What does that look like? What would you like to do with that? What was the reaction from everybody else? What's next for you? And all of that space allows the other person to expand where they are, what they're thinking, and then what they have to offer. But it is definitely a partnering and less. And I will admit that I am a nudger. I'm a big nudger, so that I'm sort of like the border collie with the sheep. It's like, you're okay to run around until, oh no, wait a minute, nope. Back over here. But lots of different leadership styles. But if your core belief is the same or shared, then you'll have a safe and productive environment for sure.
And this is, oh, go ahead.
No, you go first, Leanne.
No, I was going to say, this is where what Barb mentioned before about that coach approach and, shifting the behaviors. Like, what are the behaviors that a good leader can exhibit so that they can maintain that spark or support others, right? And what are those practical behaviors? It comes down to behavior, right? And Barb, I bet you were going to chime in around that.
Well, part of what I wanted to reinforce is, to what Corey was saying, there has to be unified approach at the organizational level. And, we can tie in the culture shaping. We have to see consistency, especially as, I'm a firm believer in this coach and mentor environment because of the pace of change, right? We have to be so dynamic and nimble within, how things are shifting. And I think, Leanne, you were the one who just said, this core belief that our job is to develop people. We've got a business to run. We've got money to make. And at the end of it, profit, people equal profits in my mind. And so until we're attending to that, we're not going to accomplish the mission. And are we all doing that equitably in the sense of commitment to this portion of our role? Because it can be, it's got to be part of your DNA. That's, we're here to develop individuals as a key part of our leadership.
I love what you just said. And it makes me think if you don't consider talent development a business imperative, you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
Right.
When you said people are profits, that you mean that in the best possible way. They are,
Yeah.
if you think profit is important, then you have to believe people are important. And when leaders can shift their thinking that their employees are their clients and that their job is not to be great to their clients, to create people that are great for their clients. That's when you scale. That's when your growth becomes possible. That's when your burnout as a leader, the chances of it decrease because you're sharing that. And I kind of laugh to myself every time leaders don't get that because they think they're being, tough and business savvy and that the people stuff is fluff. And it's like you're kidding yourself because do you want to do what you can contribute or do you want to do what 100 people can contribute? To me, my business mind says be a multiplier. That's
Absolutely.
how important it is. And it's funny that gets the laugh and not the opposite. Not to pick on anybody, but that gets me a little fired up, no pun intended.
But what does it take? What does it actually take for talent development to be part of that organization's culture and from the top?
I'm so lucky, and I don't know if I hope nobody from the firm listens to this or everybody does, but I laugh, as COO versus CHRO, I get to set the agenda for the meeting. People are not last on the list. I've worked places where the board deck and the executive deck always has HR last. We don't operate that way, number one. It's in everything. We don't even need a separate line item because it's in everything. One. Two, although I might not sound patient right now, you do have to have patience. If people don't get it, sometimes it's because they've never experienced it and never been given it. So you have to find where are my first ins to create that shift and then show the business impact of that. Scaling is probably my most used word of 2024 and 2025. And that all happens from people, but it all causes revenue growth. And when you can show that a better org structure improves the bottom line, when you can show that a training and spending time on talent development improves quality or productivity, when you can start to draw those lines, that's how you start to make it that business imperative. But you have to be patient because it takes time to create other ambassadors of that will live it and breathe it like you do. And until you have that, you're rowing a boat alone instead of all of the people rowing together.
Agreed. Can I clap for you? Yay.
I know, I'm like, I get off
Nothing
my soapbox now. But I get so fired up about it. Everything's better when the people are better. It's just everything's better and more successful. Trust me.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's really the key message, Corey, that your firm is living so well, from what I've been able to observe, as an outsider, and is, getting the leadership team to really have a broader focus than the darn spreadsheet, or dashboard or whatever the heck it is, the tool that they're using, because I guess for me, it's so easily cast aside that that's an expense we're going to have to disregard, and it comes back to bite you every time. It's almost like, research and training are the two line items, and marketing, right? That people look at those top three, and they're probably the worst possible thing you can blow up at the time when you really need help.
So true.
You're tapping into an interesting space for me as you all are talking, in that you might ask, well, why is it hard for leaders to do this? Why do we have to keep talking about it? Why isn't it a natural space? And it's not necessarily a natural space because it hasn't been rewarded. It hasn't been reinforced. It hasn't been taught even. And there is a great deal of fear happening in all of our leaders. And that's natural. That's human. But that fear that they aren't going to hit their numbers, the fear that things are going to blow up, it's going to be a spotlight on them in a negative way. there's also a fear that if I really tap into that human element, what does that mean? I don't want to be a therapist. I don't want to hear all their stuff. I don't know what to do with all of that. And some folks, it's that specific. It's like, if I ask, they're gonna tell me, and then what do I do? Right. So helping leaders understand that the human element doesn't mean you leap off the edge into this space of taking care of or creating dependency in folks. That's the opposite of where you want to go. So I think sometimes there's an acknowledgement of, hey, it's tough to be a leader and have 72 things at any given moment that you are technically responsible for. Because what happens is it's natural to focus on an outcome and not on the person. If your anxiety is around the outcomes, because your boss is going to ask you about what? Your outcomes. But what if your boss, every time you had your meeting with them, said, how are your people? What's going on with your people? Who's growing? Who's shining? If that was the first question, they'd go, oh, I bet, oh, okay, we'll start there. And then through that, talk about, and we are having these outcomes, or we're a little stalled here, but I think that's because of this. So understanding, assessment, all of that comes into play then. So.
Oh, Leanne, I absolutely love your point about positioning the people at the front end of any performance conversation. And I mean that on a daily basis. I'm not talking about this formal,
right,
once, twice quarterly event. It's just like, what's up with your people and how are they able to operate and perform?
Mm-hmm. And that's a perfect practical example of a behavior a leader could exhibit.
Yes. Oh, and I'm dying, right, Leanne, about what you said, because I just had a session last week with somebody, a coaching session, and they go, and it was talking about incredible man in a technical environment, and he goes, his fear was all about, if I open that door, I don't know if I can handle it. And I said, well, all right, let's work on, and it's a very real fear, and and I think it's just remembering that we're human beings with these technical or data-driven roles is a real, it's an important reminder.
Well, and there's two elements to that. There's that personality piece, and there's also the generational piece. And I think about, the generations coming into the workforce now have a higher expectation of that interpersonal connection and that integration and that balance. Whereas the leaders that are maybe 2 generations away, their brains don't work that way. They didn't work that way. That's another reason that you have to have a good org structure that has people in the middle of the two of you. Because if you're trying to manage people that you can't relate to or understand, and that's not a skill set you're willing to tap into, you have to have someone else that will. Otherwise, you're trying to operate with a language barrier, and a lot of not great things can happen there. So I love that you're talking to people about that, Barb, because it is a little bit scary until it's not.
Well, and it isn't scary. To your point, it's a practice that hasn't been either allowed or nurtured. And you're absolutely right. A lot of people will bring a lot of baggage, into a conversation, and that is, part of the word we haven't talked about yet today that I hope we'll weave this in is, this is the importance of accountability, and as a leader, we're accountable for a lot. And holding our people accountable is a huge challenge in the workplace today that is raising a lot of fear.
And the boundaries that, we talk about boundaries for ourselves, when does work end, when does life start, but it's also boundaries of those conversations. You want to get personal with people to a point and not bite past that, but shift the focus to, how can you be your best here and manage through all of that? So again, we're not therapists. Our job isn't to fix their problems outside of the workplace that are impacting them in the workplace, but our job is to hold them accountable to their results, focus on the pieces that are controllable within that. You can be personal without being a therapist. They're not They're not bound to each other.
Absolutely. And actually, what you're touching on is resilience. And there's different theoretical
You did it, Alina.
I did, because
beliefs around that.
that's exactly what I was going to say. This feels like building resilient teams and helping people have those or build those skills. Go ahead,
Yes.
Leanne. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, no, because what you're touching on is you have to have a belief and some experience with getting through something very difficult and getting to the other side and having a success on the other side. And that's earned and learned, right? It's like if you've never been tested, then you're not very resilient usually, right? So the more we assist folks in thinking through things, or recognizing how their behavior has shifted, or just that recognition, owning it, choosing a path, doing it, trying it, and then come back to the beginning again. Think big, use your discernment, define it, decide your action, so your how, experiment, learn, and come back again. And that's resilience. So,
Or pivot where you need to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, I try not to over compare parenting to leading, because they're not the same thing. But this is one place I do draw a parallel. The same way our job as parents is to create these independent humans that can go off in the world. I try to think of my team similarly, in that I don't want to create a world where they have to come to me for everything. I want to create a world where they're informed and empowered to make great decisions, and they can run something by me if they want to. They can make a suggestion that I will very likely take, but I don't want them to have to ask me for the answers. That's not fun for me, and it's not fun for them. So in that building resilience, we have to be willing to get out of the way, allow for the mistakes where they skin their knees and it hurts for a minute, and we even feel the pain, but they'll never learn to ride the bike without falling. I remember so clearly, my youngest daughter was trying to learn to ride her bike, and I wouldn't let go because she kept saying, "What am I going to fall?" And I didn't want to tell her yes, because then I was scared she would be scared and not try it. Well, doesn't the neighbor girl come over and say, "I'll help her, let me try"? And my daughter says to her, "I'm scared I'm going to fall." And she says, "You probably will." And she said, "Oh, okay." And off they went. And it's the same thing. Our teams will make mistakes. If we're so focused on the outcome and not the person, we won't let those mistakes happen, but we'll have the job forever.
Yes.
So that resilience, from falling down and getting back up, and we got to watch it.
Yeah.
And I want to reinforce the psychological safety here too. I think that the whole subject of resilience is, making sure that we're going to allow the recovery and help them through for what some folks might be the first mistake they've ever been allowed to make.
Yeah. Especially at work.
Yeah.
And can we connect maybe resilience back to disruption? And, how does resilience connect to sustaining the culture of disruption in talent management?
If we connect resilience back to disruption, right? And what these changes that we're trying to make, resilience allows for the risk takers.
Yeah.
If they never feel comfortable to jump and try something that's never been done before and challenge the status quo, we'll never see these great new things that can happen when we're bringing new people and new ideas into an organization. So it almost feels like, as we're talking, resilience is the prerequisite for disruption, because it's not all going to go well, and you have to be able to pivot, as you said, Alina, and try again another way.
I love this. Resilience allows for the risk takers, and it's a prerequisite for, I cannot pronounce that word, never.
What you pronounce so beautifully is your last name. I just want you to say your last name again.
It's right.
I want a name like that.
The prerequisite to disruption. I love that. And, we've been talking a lot, and I've been taking some notes because I love learning from you ladies always. And we started talking about remote versus hybrid world and how that kind of shifted the world and how life is more integrated and how individualism it's so important and getting into positive curiosity and excitement and enjoying the impact or the energy that people bring, the spark, the disruptors that have that spark, the energy that they bring. We talked about the culture shaping aspect. Oh my goodness, I have so many notes. We talked about people are prophets in the best way possible, right? The safety or the safe environment that we need to create, that psychological safety in the cultures we build and shape, and um, patience, being patient and being thinking about resilient in a way that allows for that disruption to happen, that is a prerequisite. And I keep thinking of resilient as maybe this is the word for this year. And I think, Leanne, you might have in your organization an amazing summit coming up that is all about resilience.
Mhm.
And tell us a little bit about that, because I think people will
Yep.
love to attend, participate, engage, and a great place to bring your teams where you can talk about resilience and building that up.
Absolutely. So I'm president of the local chapter, the Rochester chapter of Association for Talent Development, but that is a global community. Okay, so we are ATD is everywhere. It has all kinds of cultural aspects to it, and anyway, it's lots of depth and wonderful things there. What we choose to do here in Rochester is once a year we hold a full day that is dedicated to the professionals in talent development. Doesn't matter what your title is or what portion of the organization you're in or what you're leading, you're probably touching talent development. So this is your day to come and receive. Most of us are busy doing, creating, giving, coaching all day. This is your day to come. The goal is to inspire and inform and make great connections. So our title this year is Cultivating Resilient Talent. I always have to make sure I do that correctly. We have 7 workshops for you to choose from. So very exciting. I'll just read a couple of titles to you so you get a feel for where we're going. Play to the Edge, Building Resilient Talent in the Age of AI. Borderless Resilience, Building Strength Across Cultures, Languages, and Time Zones. From Armor to Anchor, that one's about leadership. And we have 4 more. So I would love to see you there as a participant. We're also looking for sponsors, so always ready for that, of course. It is happening on October 15th, so not too far away at this point. It's going to be at the RIT Inn and Conference Center, so it's here in Rochester, but very easy to get to. And the easiest way to find it is to go to the website. So it's ROC, ATD, ROC, ATD.org. And all of the information is there. They've got the bios for the speakers and the lineup and all the great information that you'll be looking for. And I would love to see you there.
And I will definitely put the links. You can find them below. So ladies, I can talk to you forever for all these topics. This is really awesome stuff. But if our listeners could take maybe one action today or tomorrow on how to nurture a disruptor or anything you want to share, what would that one action be that you want to share with them?
I would say put curiosity first and ask. Keep asking questions to see where they are, where they're going, what they need. How might you assist in getting them there? But that commitment to be curious and not judge is a conscious space that we have to hold. So
I think from my view, it's examining if your organization understands the true value of people first. And I think if you start there, you can recognize what's the work that needs to be done and maybe have a really good conversation with your leadership team about, the impact of a talent focus.
Mhm.
That's probably a hard thing to look in the mirror on, but I think that's where I would want to start. And if you don't have it yet, be it. You can start to be the spark in your own organization. Even if everything around you is not there, it just takes one person to get another person to get another person, and you can grow it from the ground up too.
What you said, Corey, it brings one word I don't know that we reinforce strongly enough in here, and it's about courage, right? It's having the courage to listen, having the courage to lead, having the courage to stay curious, and having the courage for change. The pace is so darn fast right now. It's making, for change agents, their heads are spinning a little bit. And so for a lot of us, it's how do we help people through this phase I think we're going through, that we don't necessarily have the tools in place to move at the pace that the world wants us to right now. So I think courage is an important foundation of where we're going.
And I love that. And what's sparking for me is having the courage also to pivot when needed, because definitely I think change is happening all over, all around, and pivot as needed. So put curiosity first, understand the value of your people, be courageous. And I will end with a be the fire pit or be the spark. So I think these are some awesome takeaways for our audience.
I see the Ross Geller meme from Friends going, pivot.
That's my favorite.
I know.
Well, thank you all three for joining us today. I think this was an awesome conversation.
Yeah. Yes. I loved it. Love all your energy and your ideas. Thank you.
Same.
Yeah. Thank you. Same here.
So be the fire pit, be the spark, and follow below. Attend the ATD Summit in October and keep disrupting, because once a disruptor,
always a disruptor.
a disruptor.